Now welcome to another lightning response video, where this time the question comes to us from Chaos Heaven, who asked, "Hey Thor, I found your adamancy against the idea that the Force might be sentient strange, since the fact that it might help fit the pieces together here. A living force that existed around and through all things could sense the intentions of those who besiege its power in any given instance. Perhaps Jedi aren't so directly responsible for their powers, but the Force can see their good intentions and move itself to the Jedi's will. Perhaps the dark side does selectively choose only worthy users to act on its behalf, which would explain why there's generally fewer of them than Jedi. It explains certain miracles, like in Rogue One when Chirrut rushes across the battle lines without taking a shot, not because he had any agency power, but because the Force literally guided him and his enemies to that conclusion. So, to my question, why would you think it controversial to pose that the Force is very much alive and active in the Star Wars universe?" Okay, so the main reason I personally don't like the idea that the Force is truly sentient or completely self-aware is that it then becomes kind of too much like a god, I feel. Whereas I've always thought of the Force as, well, as a force of nature, something that simply exists because it does, rather than one supreme being knowing and controlling everything, or a collection of supreme beings that in theory could do whatever they want to. I just like the idea of it being something that on its own is sort of there and benign, and that it gets pulled between the dark and the light based on the choices and or actions of the people that make up the Force, which is how Yoda describes it in The Empire Strikes Back, right? That life creates it, makes it grow, and so on, which then perhaps means the behavior of the people, they shape the Force in a way, or whether or not it is balanced. And so what I thought the will of the Force is then, or might be, or how something that doesn't have a sentience can still have a will, well, I thought it was more along the lines of an innate desire to be in or seek a state of balance, or something it naturally gravitates towards without thought. Basically, I believed the Force inherently kind of moves towards a state where things in the galaxy run smoothly, and somehow through the midi-chlorians, the Jedi can kind of sense what will help bring that desired state about. And yeah, I know you can quickly counter with, well, the Force created the Chosen One, and that seems to imply a level of intelligence, that it actively did something to intervene. Though I think it could also be more along the lines of something that happened as a reaction to the dark side and the meddling of those who use it, which is even what the book Plagueis implies. It implies the Force reacted to him manipulating the midi-chlorians to try to make a Chosen One, essentially. Anyway, though I'm not sure about or kind of a fan of the idea of the Force itself being sentient, there certainly does seem to be forces within the Force, or that are a big part of it, that very much are sentient. Things like the Force Priestess or the Mortis gods, both of which we saw in the Clone Wars. They seem to have greater influence over the Force and how it works than most do, and obviously they are sentient, though it still doesn't seem like any of them have anything resembling absolute control over the Force, or that they are the Force itself. However, all that said, now we have to move on to things George Lucas has said in more recent years about the Force and what his sequel trilogy would have been about or looked like. That it would have delved into the microbiotic realm and dealt with the wills. And he talked about how they, the wills, feed on the Force and use people like vehicles. And that they basically are the Force, that the wills in general are the Force. And these are all his words, not mine. And after hearing him say this, I really think Lucas's sequel trilogy would have almost fully explained what the Force truly is and how it works. It would have been his way of sort of showing his brilliance, letting us see the bigger picture that he's created for this reality of his. Even though he also acknowledged that he thought a lot of people would have hated it, just like they hated midi-chlorians in the prequels, which was just a small part of this bigger explanation, he's said. And this is then probably at least part of the reason why Disney didn't want to use his ideas for the sequels. They obviously didn't want people hating the films, even though a lot of people ended up hating what Disney came up with anyway. But they also didn't want to pull back the curtain and show everything and have Star Wars lose any and all of that air of mystery around the Force. Especially right after Disney had spent $4 billion to milk that mystery for all it's worth until basically the end of time. Either way, how Lucas has described the wills recently, and again he even calls them the Force, and considering he also went on to say that the midi-chlorians can communicate with the wills, that they act like a conduit, and then obviously, as we see in The Phantom Menace, they can convey that information or the will of the wills to those who can hear it, to those who are Force sensitive or have a high midi-chlorian count. Well, all that does seem to imply my interpretation of the Force and how it all works, that balance is something innately sought after, is way, way off, and that yes, the Force is sentient to at least some degree, or at least the wills are, and that it does try to enforce a will or destiny upon the people of the galaxy. Though Lucas has also said that the people have free will because they don't have to follow that destiny that has been set forth for them. And so, if I had to throw out a sort of crazy or wild theory or guess here when it comes to what George Lucas is thinking or where he's going with all of this, how it all would work, well, to me it seems like the Wills want to create this sort of perfect and balanced existence for the people. But that the actual people who make up that existence don't always listen or can't always listen because they can't hear the midichlorians, and they oftentimes either ignore or miss their destiny that was laid out before them, and that would make things perfect or balanced. That would lead to a harmonious existence for all if everyone just listened to their chosen destiny. And so when Lucas says that the wills feed on the Force, I don't think he means that they truly feed off it in terms of consume it, but that it sort of empowers them. The same way you might describe a musician or an athlete as feeding off the energy of the crowd. Basically, when things are going as they should, when things are balanced in the galaxy, the wills are empowered and they can keep the cycle of the Force going indefinitely. But when things are out of balance, they lose that power and it threatens, I don't know, maybe even existence itself or the Force itself, which essentially is existence and is also the wills, I guess. It could also be that what sort of creates the dark side, and this is just fun speculation, but it could be that ignoring or not following your destiny, it could be that the selfishness of people, deliberate or not, is what creates this opposite effect of balance and throws the whole thing into chaos or weakens the wills and their ability to manage the galaxy or manage existence itself, basically. This is then why the wills tell the Jedi through the midichlorians their will and how to fix things or bring about balance, and why they, again the wills, ultimately made Anakin Skywalker. They made a chosen one and had Qui-Gon find him because things were getting way out of whack. The balance was about to be utterly destroyed with the rise of Palpatine, and eventually if the dark side grows too strong, it can destroy everything. It consumes like a cancer, which is how Lucas has described it. It could even be going along with what the initial comment sort of suggested, that the dark side has also kind of formed its own sort of sentience, and seeks out those who it knows it can corrupt and ultimately uses them to further its own cause of perhaps self-destruction. Though obviously those who use it don't understand its true endgame. They don't understand what the dark side is after because they're actually seeking the opposite. They seek things like unlimited power and eternal life, and by getting that strong enough to achieve these very unnatural things, they actually kind of achieve the opposite overall, or for the galaxy. Once they, the Sith, have literally everything, they end up destroying everything, which seems very fitting for the dark side and the Sith. Along with all this, maybe the Chosen One was meant to even destroy the dark side's sentience within the Force and bring about a truly lasting balance. Who knows? Now, is that all what Lucas was going for? And if it is that what Star Wars fans want Star Wars to be? Do fans want Star Wars to be about these beings known as the Wills who try to create a perfect universe, while simultaneously giving people the free will that could destroy that universe? And that's because perhaps they've learned through time, almost ironically, that life isn't worth living without having free will. And I mean, personally, I like it and don't like it. I like the idea that free will risks the destruction of everything, yet also you could argue it's what makes life worth living. The uncertainty of tomorrow is both terrifying and alluring. It's what makes us want to stay in bed and hide, and at the same time get out of it every day and explore and live life. But I don't know if I like, or if Star Wars needs, this seemingly intelligence in there that is the Wills. I almost think it all works better without it, assuming I'm on the right track with what Lucas was going for, which I might not be. Though, speaking of all this, I would love to one day find out exactly what George Lucas's vision was for all of this. Even if I hated what it ended up being, I'd still love to know. However, I highly doubt he's able to tell us his vision or version of Star Wars anymore. Not in great detail, anyway. I highly doubt Disney would be happy with him coming out and telling us what he would have done with the franchise. In fact, it's probably in the contract that he can't do that. And we also know they want us to somehow enjoy what they're doing instead of always looking at what Lucas would have done and wishing for that. Well, that's all I got for this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me if you think the Force is sentient, or tell me how you think it all works. Or you can always ask a question for a future lightning response video. Just start your comment off of Hey Thor and then ask away. But whatever you choose to do, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.